As we get ready to celebrate Reverend Martin Luther King's birthday on Monday, we are not only reminded of his civil rights message, but his economic one as well. Dr. King saw inequality as a fundamental and tragic flaw in American society. And before his death, he made it clear that economic issues were the focus of his cause. Nearly 50 years later, many believe his words are still very much relevant. Joining us now by phone is Stacy Swimp, National Christian Leadership Council President. Stacy, welcome back to Arise Exchange. Good afternoon, Stacy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
So Dr. King spoke of two Americas. One, his words, socialism for the rich, and the other, rugged individualism for the poor. That's a message that we still hear today. If he looked at society today and our economic environment, what would he say?
Well, I think he would have much of the same commentary. I think he would be critical of very harsh governmental policies which are locking out minorities, Hispanics, and women in particular from some of our construction industries and some of the things that help us to maintain infrastructure in our inner cities. I think he'd be very critical of the criminal justice system, which has strong economic implications, particularly for the poor. I think he'd still be talking about some of the same things that he was talking about when he was organizing the Poor People's Campaign, which I want to add was not just specifically related to Black Americans, but he was organizing all Americans. We got a lot of poor white Americans, particularly in the rural areas, that are suffering from governmental injustice. You have government favoring big businesses and in some instances forcing farmers not to be able to grow on their land or putting them in very tough positions, though they're private property owners, where they can't profit from their own property.
So, Stacy, what do you think Dr. King's main economic message would be today then? How would he communicate basically what you're saying, empowerment?
I think Dr. King would be mobilizing white, Black, Hispanic, and women and so on. I think he'd be mobilizing people today, particularly to do something about manufacturing jobs and laboring jobs. I think that would be his number one priority. And I think he'd be addressing it from the standpoint of doing away with harsh policies that are crippling hundreds of thousands of Americans from the workforce. What
would he like about today's society if he was to just reappear today? What do you think would impress him the most?
I think the political vitriol and the fact that it seems that we have such a moral decay in our society. So I think those two issues would be, you gotta remember, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher, and in all 5 of his books, he constantly reiterated the fact that he was doing the will of God, and that was his thrust. He was not a political leader. And so in today's society, it seems that politicians, pundits, seem to impact the direction of our culture more so than the church. And I think he'd be very critical of the church itself, because he once said that silence is betrayal. And today you see the church is very silent in the face of many problems in the nation today. So I think King would focus on those two things preeminently.
Stacey, you tend to be on the conservative side of the ledger, so this may be an obvious question, but what do you think of those specifically who say that they continue to carry out Dr. King's legacy, people like Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson? Do you think...
No, I think that they're deceptive. I think, you see, Dr. King's legacy was that of Moses, of Jesus, of Frederick Douglass. King was not a charlatan. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, these people played to the tune of the money they get from lobbyists and the media and such. King was not a media hound. He was a person who cared preeminently about those who didn't have a voice. He didn't just show up when there were lights, cameras, and action. And King was not one to perpetuate racist rhetoric and divisiveness. The kind of behavior that you've seen from Al Sharpton and Ferguson and Crown Heights, and the kind of conduct that you've seen from Jesse Jackson, who's pandering on the behalf of one party instead of holding both parties accountable, which is what King did, I think would be disgusting to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today.
Okay, Stacy Swimp, as always, thank you so much. Stacy Swimp, National Christian Leadership Council President. Appreciate it. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Well, next week on Arise Exchange, the markets are closed on Monday in honor of the MLK holiday, so we'll bring you a very special holiday show. Then we are off to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. where we will be talking to world leaders and business leaders and probably going to a few parties and trying to make a whole bunch of connections and bringing you back all of that news as well. Let's take a look at how the markets did for the week. The Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ basically all just turned it around today because we had triple-digit losses for just about every single day this week. And then the inflation report came in. It was so tame. Everybody thinks that the Fed will be able to do simply nothing. And so the markets went up. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Have a nice weekend.